Hello and welcome to the GZERO World Podcast. This is where you can find extended versions of my show on public television. I'm Ian Bremmer, and on the pod this week, I'm bringing you the Pakistani perspective on the recent rise in India-Pakistan tensions. The roots of this modern rivalry go back to the 1947 partition, but this year those strains reached a fever pitch. After a terrorist attack in Kashmir in April left 25 Indians dead, India and Pakistan engaged in military strikes that escalated rapidly. Luckily, they were able to reach a ceasefire just days later. Still, nerves are on edge in both Delhi and Islamabad. My guest today, by no means an objective voice on the conflict, but she is an important one. Hina Khar served as Pakistan's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs in 2022 and Foreign Minister in 2011. And as you'll hear, she doesn't mince words when it comes to what she calls Pakistan's belligerent neighbor. And with that, let's get to it.
The GZERO World Podcast is brought to you by our lead sponsor, Prologis. Prologis helps businesses across the globe scale their supply chains with an expansive portfolio of logistics real estate and the only end-to-end solutions platform addressing the critical initiatives of global logistics today. Learn more at prologis.com.
Hina Khar, welcome back to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It's nice that you're here in person in New York.
Absolutely.
It's really good.
In your headquarters.
So talk to me a little bit. I mean, I know it was a few months ago, but it was a scary time. Two nuclear powers really facing off against each other. Talk us through a little bit from your perspective of what this fight was all about.
So this country, India, a very large, what I call a belligerent country, decides that if there is a security lapse in their own territory or if something happens, terrorism is kind of common in South Asia and now the rest of the world also, that they have the right to launch missile strikes into another country, which also happens to be a nuclear state, and not worry about the repercussions and claim to the world that we have set new norms. While it was doing that, it offered no evidence to the country that it was attacking or to the world for how that country was in any which way involved with the attack that happened in Pahalgam.
So you're talking about the fact that the Indian government has and continues to state that the terrorism that occurred targeting and killing Indian civilians in Kashmir was that the Pakistani military and ergo leadership was in some way directly contributing to, participating in, responsible for that attack.
What you make is kind of a responsible statement. They don't even make that much of a responsible statement. They just say it emanated from Pakistan. And therefore now they have a right to attack, send missile strikes into another nuclear state. And this is the first time, I believe in history, that one nuclear state has launched direct missile strikes into another nuclear state. And 2019 was the first time. I think that's when we did the first show on the sidelines of Munich.
That's right.
When I started calling India a rogue state for the first time, because that was the first time since 1971, which was the last big war that Pakistan and India had, before this war now, that India decided to send its military jets into our territory. So it shows a behavioral pattern which makes the days which have passed difficult, as you said, scary, as you said, but which makes you really worry about the future. Because the norm that they're setting has been in some ways rendered irrelevant by Pakistan's reaction and Pakistan's ability to down their jets.
So just so I understand, because again, India's perspective on this and their statements are very different than what you just put forward. And that's not a surprise, right? I mean, they're two belligerents involved in a war for a long time, all this sort of thing. Is it your view that that unless direct evidence is put forward, that Pakistan should not blame any responsibility for this? Is that fair?
It's absolutely not only the fair, but the logical, rational thing to do, no?
Again, I just want to make sure that you were stating it. Yes, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, and I would, you're a friend, so I would not question you on this, but not two belligerents, one belligerent. You and I go to many places where we're talking about the Indo-Pacific strategy and India being the net security provider. Suddenly, India, by its own actions, has showed to the world that not only is it perhaps capable of managing security for all of the Western Hemisphere in the Indo-Pacific, but it cannot even manage its own security, not only by internal security, but that when it launches an attack and Pakistan decides to use its right, according to United Nations Charter, to attack it back, it has no way to defend itself. So the harm that they gave us, we were able to give them +1 in some ways.
So the strikes that we saw, there were military targets in India that Pakistan hit. There were military targets in Pakistan that India hit. There was talk about close to nuclear facilities as well. The Americans were clearly very concerned about this, wanted a ceasefire as quickly as possible. I mean, how close were we, in your view, to a out of control escalation? Because again, we're talking about two nuclear powers, and this is not in the news every day in the United States. But I mean, nobody should want India and Pakistan to be at war with each other, right?
So again, I would just like to maybe step 2 steps back to contextualize this, right? When you say how close were we? To me, from the moment that one nuclear state decides to attack militarily through missiles, through fighter jets, etc., another nuclear state, you do not know how quickly you'd go up the escalation ladder. So you could be 1 day away, you could be 10 days away, you could be 30 days away, you could be a few seconds away. But I'm appalled by the intent of any country which launches a strike into another nuclear state, knowing full well what the capacity and even the conventional capacity is. And by no means do we want to disregard the fact that this, the India-Pakistan region is home to 1/5 of humanity, quite literally 1/5 of humanity. And to put them at stake because of political engineering happening in your own country is rather being very callous. Because in situations like this, the escalation ladder can go up in nanoseconds, right? Because when you are using missiles which have the capacity to carry nuclear heads, who knows on the other side as to whether it is carrying or not, and how much, with all the technology that is available to you, there are missteps that happen. And I think this whole adventurism that has now started as the new norm that they're pushing, which have absolutely no space in international law, norms of interstate relations, etc., is just saying that we don't care, what happens in reaction, and taking a risk which they don't. I think they cannot afford to take.
Now, did you find the American involvement in this war, was it useful? Was it relevant? I mean, Prime Minister Modi actually publicly said that the U.S. had nothing to do with the ceasefire, right? Which, I mean, unusually, because most people are saying how wonderful Trump is, at least publicly. Modi hasn't done that. That's kind of interesting. I mean, how do you see the Americans here, if at all?
Okay, so I see it obviously the way it was. Okay, I see it the way it was stated by Secretary Rubio's tweet, the way it was stated by President Trump's Truth Social, tweet, if you can call it that. They basically said that, look, we intervened, we asked them to go towards ceasefire, both countries agreed, we would do trade with them, we would like to normalize, and Secretary Rubio also said that we would like them to start negotiating on other pending issues between the two countries at another location, etc., etc. Now, the Indians came out and said, oh, well, they never intervened. So initially, the Indians were calling Pakistan liars and saying their misstatements and their misquoting, etc. And suddenly now they found themselves in a position where they were calling their own strategic partner, in some ways a liar, because they said it never happened. It did happen. Of course it happened. And it happened right after Pakistan decided to launch its counter strikes. And when Pakistan launched its counter strikes, I think India lost a lot of balance, okay, because we got their 5 jets. The first time that they did the
These
strikes,
are the Rafale jets that
the Rafale jets,
Indians have that the Pakistanis
which no country has ever lost in combat operation before, and India has now, the unique privilege to be a country who was able to lose Rafale jets, during. So no point scoring on that count. But then after that, when Pakistan launched its proper counter strikes, I think between 9th and 10th, India lost a lot of balance because we were able to go right into the heart of India. We were able to launch as many strikes as we willed. We had targets, military targets otherwise, from points that they had actually started the attacks from. We took no civilian targets, unlike India, which was goading and celebrating the fact that it was able to kill this many Pakistanis, etc. We took no civilian targets because we wanted to go by, obviously we wanted to be credible, transparent, go by international law, etc. So I think this was really a unique moment, Ian, because in the last 2 decades or so, India has been projected, promoted all over the world as, the democratic, institutionalized, happy India that is, a Western partner and shares the values, etc. And Pakistan has obviously suffered from, whatever happened in terms of the international cooperation in Afghanistan. How that did not go well. And I like to believe, again, perhaps you would say a biased view, that Pakistan got to shoulder all the blame for everybody's mistakes in Afghanistan, right? Be as it may, where India was, where Pakistan was in the global calculation, every time we would go into a war game, every time we do a calculus, every time we do a calculation, Indian conventional supremacy is never ever questioned. And here in the war theater, you found out that it really didn't hold. So, all of that assessment.
I mean, the other point, of course, on the Trump comments at the time was that there was an announcement that there was going to be trilateral discussions, negotiations ongoing, which was immediately rejected
by India.
By India.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not as if the credibility of the Trump administration is 100% on the statements going through. And that's why I'm asking you, when we talk about importance of a ceasefire, to what extent it was 100% correct from your perspective. But you're saying that Pakistan actually backs up what the Americans were saying. Now, the Pakistan relationship with the U.S. is clearly much more comfortable today than it was in Trump's first administration. When aid to Pakistan was suspended, we now have more military aid coming from the United States to Pakistan. We recently had a trip by the military chief of staff to meet with Trump. They said you should get a Nobel Peace Prize, which was later rescinded. I mean, it looks messy, and a lot of times these relationships are. Tell me what you think the Pakistani military is trying to accomplish with Trump right now.
Okay, first of all, I don't think it's military aid as it is Pakistan having paid for some military hardware which was not delivered because of reasons best known to American administrations. So that's where, the military...
Was unfrozen from that.
Was unfrozen. Okay, I think that's a correct assessment. Okay, so what does Pakistani military want from the United States of America? What does Pakistan, I think I would put it in a broader context, what does Pakistan want from the United States? Look, I think interstate relations does have some historical relevance, okay? And Pakistan and the United States have had long-standing, relations which have had to do with the Afghanistan 1, Afghanistan 2, but also about collaboration, cooperation in multiple fields, certainly in the military field, right? That suffered in the intermediary period, I believe, where I think the United States of America started viewing Pakistan exclusively from the Indian lens. Now, India having shown its lack thereof of some strength, which were associated with it, or for whatever reasons, which is best known to the two parties, which is the United States of America and India. I think there is a reality check in the United States of America about how Pakistan must not be viewed from the Indian lens, which is an exceptionally belligerent, towards Pakistan, wanting hegemonic designs towards Pakistan, etc. And wanting an independent relation with Pakistan, looking at what Pakistan has to offer to the US and what the US has to offer to Pakistan. I think what Pakistan has to offer to the US is not limited to, but it is absolutely a major part of it is the very, very good counterterrorism work that we've been able to do in the last few months, last few years. And I think that has built a lot of confidence. Other than that, within the region, whether you call it Indo-Pacific, whether you call it West Asia, whatever nomenclature you use, I think the relevance of Pakistan for the United States remains. And other than that, we have people-to-people contact. We have contacts in education. We have contacts in, our trade, etc. So I think it is just the ability or the learning from experience of not viewing Pakistan from any hyphenation with India or with Afghanistan and viewing Pakistan for Pakistan. And this is what Pakistan seeks from the United States also. A normal, predictable, consistent relationship which is based on mutual interest and a lot of mutual respect.
Pakistan's most important relationship over the past decade has been with China. Belt and Road has had significant investments. Some of them have panned out well, some of them have not. China's had more economic challenges recently. They've been less interested in following through in a lot of the big commitments that they've made. But there's also security alignment. China-India relationships has improved a little bit, but is still fairly tense. There are a lot of sanctions that are challenging that relationship, a lot of export controls, that kind of thing, initially from India against China. So now give me the Pakistan view on your China relationship today.
Okay, so please allow me the space to say that I just find it so interesting that suddenly, in the last 10 years, the world has started noticing Pakistan-China strong strategic ties.
Well, they've noticed it with China's ties with many, many countries.
Yes.
I mean, in Latin America as well. I mean, once Belt and Road is announced, once the BRICS become not a Goldman Sachs term, but an actual event, then the Chinese are saying, no, we're actually ready to be treated as a global leader.
Sure.
And once they put themselves forward as a global leader, suddenly their relationships are more relevant to the Americans in particular, who see things through a more geostrategic lens, but the Europeans, the Japanese, others too.
So I think there's a difference between China's relationship with Belt and Road initiatives, which is spanning all the way to Africa and, the Middle Eastern countries, everywhere else. And Pakistan and China have had historical ties, which have been strategic in nature and very, very deep for many decades. And one beneficiary of those ties was Henry Kissinger's plan to normalize with China, as you may remember, where Pakistan played a key role in being that bridge which allowed them to connect. So Pakistan and China have had these relations, whereas at the same time, Pakistan has had very strong relations with the US all of this time throughout those decades. But the world wasn't noticing China as a competitor.
Correct.
Okay, at that time. And so the world didn't care. Who cared about China-Pakistan relations? Suddenly, where China is feeling and seeming like a threat to the world because of its emerging economic power, technological power, perhaps military power.
No, the point there is just that things are much more expensive in the U.S. than China. So actually bang for buck, as it were, it creates more parity there.
Sure.
But I take your point.
Okay, so you asked about what's the relationship with China, okay? So look, we view China in a very different way, Ian. And as a friend and as someone who likes to associate themselves with the Western countries also and does not want the world to be broken into two blocks and does not believe in decoupling or even or the need for de-risking as much as the rest of the world sees, I just feel like an alien in this new world that is being created around us, okay, where everybody's told that somebody has to be the enemy. Now, this country that you continue, or not you, but many, analysis all over the world continue to talk about as very belligerent, very hegemonic, wanting power, etc., and wanting military. We've always seen in our region, which happens to be an immediate neighbor of China, to be a country which only relies on economic relationships, which has not gone and done any interventionist attacks in another country to set it right, which has not really attacked another country in the region for decades. Within Pakistan and within the broader region, China has been a force of stability and a force of economic so to be able to give the type of economic goods and infrastructure which were no more available by the World Bank or the Asian Development Bank. So as the traditional multilateral agencies stopped financing infrastructure, China came in and wanted to do it in a really big way. We were all up for it because we all truly believe that having trains which go from South Asia to West Asia, having strong highways which connect the northern nodes of Pakistan with the southern nodes and perhaps with China, but also on the western side, with Iran and beyond, with Afghanistan and beyond, with Uzbekistan and beyond.
Because no one else
all a good thing.
No one else was prepared to invest at that scale, right?
Absolutely there to.
So my question to you, because
like
Belt and Road was unique in terms of ability of countries in the global South to get long-term strategic investment. No question.
Absolutely.
Beyond what the U.S. and USAID were doing in most of these countries, certainly in your country. I'm asking you, is this as strong today as it has been over the past decades? Precisely because China's economy is facing challenges because they're focusing more domestically, right? How has the last few years, how is the expectation of China-Pakistan ties relate to the hype?
I wouldn't want the hype to be overhyped in any ways. I think there's some strong ties. Look, first of all, there is an alignment of interests. Okay, and what are those interests? So we want to view it in the strategic terms and terms which are harmful to the rest. I don't view it like that at all. I look at those interests as a stable region, a region which is economically integrated, a region which is infrastructurally integrated, a region in which there's interoperability when it comes to infrastructure, a region where you can, like in Europe, move from one country to the other through a road network or a train network. And that's the type of alignment of interests in some ways that we have. I do not see this having dissipated at all by way of what you're calling the economic crisis, because, since 1996, since I was old enough to read, what the Time magazine and economists, etc., were writing, we were talking about China's economic powers now emerging, okay? And they have found ways to be able to deal with it one way or the other. And I think what you see in the world is that every time something goes down, there are ways of others to emerge, and there's a balancing act, etc. I'm not sitting here really worrying about what China is going to do economically and what has that changed vis-a-vis Pakistan or their collaboration with Pakistan. I mean, the honest answer is nothing.
So if you look forward the next decade, do you think China is still seen as the principal economic driver for your country externally?
I think external is a good way to put it, right? I think the principal economic driver for my country has to be the ecosystem which is built within Pakistan and not an external one. But the principal economic driver in terms of infrastructure, financing, development, etc., simply because they're the only ones who are willing to do it. They are the only, they're the larger player. Let's just put it that way.
You're listening to the GZERO World with Ian Bremmer podcast, your weekly geopolitical deep dive into the world's biggest news stories, featuring in-depth conversations with global leaders and newsmakers. To get more of GZERO's insights on global politics every morning, sign up for our free newsletter, GZERO Daily, at gzeromedia.com.
All sorts of issues with the Pakistan economy. Again, it's a relatively poor country. It's a large population. You've had a lot of energy shortages. There's been a lot of inflation. And there's been a lot of political instability. Again, not new.
Yeah.
Tell our audience a little bit about Pakistan's opportunities and their challenges right now.
So I think Pakistan is over the hump of the extreme political challenges, which were because of a highly populist leader, which has happened in many countries all over the world.
The former Prime Minister who's in jail right now.
Who's in jail right now. Okay, so we're over that hump, I believe. I think we have a far more stable environment. When we have a functional government, work is going on, and nobody seems to be really missing Mr. Imran Khan, other than his obviously core, support base. On the economic side, there's been a lot of stability. There's macroeconomic stability, but we have to now translate that into what I was talking about, creating the ecosystem for businesses to thrive and flourish. I think we have a lot of work in our taxation system, in how we collect those revenues, not to be extortionists, etc., etc. When you look at it from the point of view of the region, I think the biggest concern of instability, etc., is our eastern neighbor, which is India, which I believe, again, a biased view perhaps, but I believe is coming in the way of regional integration on the east, whether it's the SAARC countries or what they call the BIMSTEC countries or what we call, the Middle Eastern bloc, West Asia. So if I look at my region and say, okay, what is one reason why we're not integrating? It really is Pakistan-India dispute and India's inability to come out of that, to view Pakistan and the region as its home, as its geography. So in India's denialism of its own geography in some ways is coming in the way of regional integration. For a country like Pakistan, I think regional integration is important. We are at a much, much better place, and we would like to be. We are on a path which could take us at a very good place.
Now, there are millions of Afghan refugees in Pakistan today, and the government has taken recently a much more aggressive view on repatriation, on getting those refugees out. What's behind the sudden change? And is it popular on the ground in Pakistan? Is it successful?
Look, it depends on where you are in Pakistan. So in many areas of Pakhtunkhwa, of course, it would not be very popular, right? In many areas of Punjab, it will be very popular. Perhaps in some areas of Sindh, it will be popular, right? But eventually, I think it is just accepting the fact that two countries have to operate like two countries in order to have stable relations, right? You cannot have geographical borders, political borders separating two countries and act as if the people can go and come without any visas, without any protocols, without any passports. And as things are becoming more stable in Afghanistan, I think the reasons for them to go back are also many. So this thing about those who have been nationalized are nationalized. They are legal citizens in some ways. Those who have the Afghan card have the card. But those who just, every day are crossing over. And I think a lot of this also has to do with the really big swing of terrorism that we saw inside Pakistan's borders right after the United States and all its allies decided to leave Afghanistan one fine night or day, all of a sudden leave us to deal with the mess. And you know that there's been an escalation in terrorist attacks since then. So I think our job is first of all to provide security to Pakistanis. Once we're able to do that very well, then we can start offering our services to other countries. So it's really coming from that vantage point more than anything else.
So I'll go back to where we started, because development in your region, stability in your region, ultimately there's one country that's much larger. There's much country that's much more economically, technologically sophisticated, also has all the water, and that's India. And if there's one thing that we've learned in the last few years, it's that we're living in a world where economic and political and military power has had greater impact.
Absolutely.
Fewer rules, more
Absolutely.
fragmentation.
Absolutely.
You can do what you want if you have the capacity.
Absolutely.
And so does that reality require Pakistan in reality to be much more cautious, much more restrained, understand that no one's coming to your rescue, and so you better actually find a way to suck up? I mean, I see what's happened to Iran recently from Israel, and think about what you will of the Israelis or the Iranians. That's not the point. The point is that a lot of Iran's deterrence no longer actually counts for much, right? So talk a bit about that.
Okay, so the layout that you gave, I absolutely agree with it. I think when we, first started to work on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum on the geoeconomics, then we were looking at the world in a very different way. There were still structures of order which existed. Multilateralism was something which
was stronger. It was real.
stronger.
Yeah. This was 15 years ago.
This was 15 years ago, okay? And you had all of this protection from international law, from interstate relations, norms of behavior, and everybody was by and large abiding by them. Even those who were not abiding by them were still using the language of abiding by them. And now, because of whatever has happened in the Middle East, in Palestine, whatever has happened, within India and Pakistan context, whatever has happened within Ukraine-Russia context, it just seems like there are no rules holding anyone back. Okay, and how veto powers, both by Russia and the United States, have been used. There are no rules, there are no norms of behavior, and everybody can do whatever they can as far as they have the ability, both politically and militarily, to be able to get away with it. However, the lesson that Pakistan has learned from it is quite the opposite of let's suck up and deal with and make peace with it. Okay, the lesson that we have learned from this recent conflict with India is that if you have both the will and the capacity and the capability to be able to defend your sovereignty and keep in a belligerent hegemonic country from creating a new norm, attacking, and you attack back and are able to pay them their payload in damage, you are securing yourself. So to each their own, that you have to secure yourself, and absolutely right, no one's going to come to help you. So you have to have all the abilities. So basically what
Pakistan needs to, the big lesson is Pakistan needs to continue to redouble its military strength. Its nuclear deterrent is essential in this
stability,
environment,
its economic strength, its nuclear. And, Ian, as someone who was representing this country back in 2010 to 13 as Foreign Minister of Pakistan, and who grew up, hearing all of these nice liberal values and lessons and lectures on how you should not be spending on your military, or why did you even build a nuclear, facilities or military. Why are you a nuclear power? Why did you not invest in your education? I bought all of that. I genuinely bought all of that, right? And I used to wonder, why were we reduced to eating grass to become a nuclear power? And now with this India, with the Hindutva, Modi India, which feels it has a right to launch attack whenever it feels, wherever it feels, within its neighborhood, you realize the importance of the thinking and the strategic planning of the forefathers and all the regimes that came into Pakistan and governments that came into Pakistan which stuck to that notion. And that is the only thing which is providing us the deterrence and the security that we have today against a country which feels it can attack anytime, any day. And what worries me, Ian, is that this is not a trend which is only confined to Pakistan and India. When I see NATO countries and when I see the European Union saying that, yes, you can go, 0.5% over the budget limitations only for military financing, we all feel threatened today. We all have fear which has overtaken us. So you know how they say that it's very easy to sell fear, but it's very difficult to sell hope. I feel that we are all investing, and I'm not going to put Pakistan in that bracket because we are not the aggressors in this context of India-Pakistan, okay? So bear in mind, Ian, that having really broken their myth of conventional supremacy and really damaged their military and been able to launch military strikes, etc., missile strikes, etc., down their jets. After all of that, the messaging that, for instance, the parliamentary delegation where Bilawal Bhutto Zardari was leading and that we were all part of was taking to the rest of the world was, please try and put some sense into India to come to the negotiating table and settle our long-standing disputes such as Kashmir. Terrorism is a common problem. If we start sit on a dialogue table, start what we call the composite dialogue process, we can deal with terrorism on both sides.
But Canada has managed to, with a new government, but without any change in India's policy, they've managed to reset and engage in more functional negotiations.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering if you think the same thing can happen between Pakistan and India.
And the difference over here is that India wants to speak to Canada behind closed doors or give it assurances, and India feels to Pakistan, we owe nothing. Yeah. Okay? India is a country which has said, we do not want an international investigation. When the Pakistani Prime Minister said, let's do an investigation, international investigation on Pahalgam and find out where these attacks
on the attacks, yeah, that's right.
It also said, we don't want negotiations with Pakistan. We are not going to give it the pleasure of negotiation. It also said that we don't want any third-party intervention on this. It also said we don't want a multilateral solution to it, right? So I just, one asks the question, then what does it want? Does it seek perpetual conflict?
Well, no, it's fairly obvious, is that in this environment, right, which you and I both just discussed, whenever you look at a conflict where one country is dramatically more powerful than the other, the more powerful country is resisting multilateralism, is resisting bringing other countries in, feels like it's in a much stronger position if it can avoid those things. That's not unusual, right? I mean, Israel would make the same argument, Russia would make the same argument, the United States frequently makes the same argument.
Look, there's one big difference. There is one big difference. Palestine, Israel, when you say one is far more powerful, Ukraine, Russia, when you say one is far more powerful, United States and, Afghanistan, Iraq, even Iran, one is far more powerful, I buy it. India, Pakistan, when you say one is far more powerful, larger number of people, larger economy, bigger, etc. But in the war theater, what was proven was that one is not one, as in India, is not far more powerful at all. In fact, Pakistan is far more capable, is what has been proven on the war theater. I mean, we can view it as we will, right? Yeah. These are both nuclear power countries, so that the same thing doesn't exist. Let's assume we didn't do this.
The nukes matter. Absolutely.
The nukes clearly matter.
But you'd like to believe that nukes would have more deterrent capability. And yet, what we seem to be learning is, and this is a Russia issue too, the West was concerned about Russia's nukes at the beginning of the war.
Yes.
And now they're doing things to support Ukraine that they would have never done because Russia can't use those nukes. And you kind of feel like India has the same sort of view on Pakistan. Well, we bombed once. They knew that they couldn't use the nukes. We bombed a second time. We've expanded. We know they can't use it. So they have them. They're table stakes. But maybe having nukes isn't actually the be-all, end-all deterrent. Again, ask Putin how much he feels like his nuclear force is stopping the West from taking shots at him, right? And the reality is less than we think.
I mean, the reality is always far more complex. I believe India's current behavior is a lot of it is a function of the impunity that it has been provided by the Western Hemisphere in some ways because of its need for India in the China containment, right? I think a lot of India's current behavior within the region is a result of that. I believe a lot of India's behavior pre this latest advent where Pakistan was able to really, give it back to them militarily in a way that they probably thought we would not dare to do, was because they thought, we could get away with it. We sent military jets. All Pakistan did was down our jets at that time also. So now when they take a step like this, I think they will think twice. But clearly what is not, what we can't underestimate is the roguish tendencies of India right now to just be very, very, not be risk averse at all and be willing to take any risk possible to be able to do their political engineering and, political vote counting, because they have defined their identity in a very non-secular way. So this is really India moving away from its traditional secular identity to India defined an identity which has to be anti the Muslim neighbor, has to be anti-Muslims which are within India, right? So it's the world has changed in many ways, but the world has dramatically changed within subcontinent also because the Modi government came in 10 years back. And people tell you, Mumbai happened and after that India can't recover. After Mumbai, we had composite dialogue. I chaired that dialogue. So it's really what's changed within the equation within our region, what has made it much more flagrant, much more risky, much more nuclear power risky is the Modi government's identity of anti anything which is Muslim, anti-Pakistan. And the other thing I wanted to say is that you're making all of those assessments assuming that people are logical, rational thinkers. I think all over the world, aren't we seeing that leadership is increasingly becoming less and less logical, less and less rational?
No, I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think that's the interesting thing is that, you have so many leaders out there that you want to paint them as irrational, and they certainly may have different values, they may have different objectives, but when push comes to shove, there's a lot of rationality. And one of the interesting things about like Elon Musk is that he's one of the very few leaders I've seen that has acted in ways that are very hard to predict because they seem to be against his own interests. I haven't seen global leaders running countries acting in ways that really appear to be against their own interests as defined by them.
Against their own interests or their country's interests?
Oh, no, against their own interests.
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah,
of course.
Of course.
And that to me
That's
is
really
a
good.
level of rationality, whether it's Putin or Trump or, whether it's Modi or anybody else for that matter.
So it's very selfish rationality or
depends.
logic, which is only for the person and not for the country. I meant for the country.
I understand. Yeah. Country is, at the end of the day, we may be divided into nation states, but they're not the only affiliations that we care about.
Sure.
Right? Hina Khar, thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleasure. Always.
That's it for today's edition of the GZERO World Podcast. Do you like what you heard? Of course you do. Why not make it official? Why don't you rate and review GZERO World? 5 stars, only 5 stars, otherwise don't do it. On Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tell your friends.
The GZERO World Podcast is brought to you by our lead sponsor, Prologis. Prologis helps businesses across the globe scale their supply chains with an expansive portfolio of logistics real estate and the only end-to-end solutions platform addressing the critical initiatives of global logistics today. Learn more at prologis.com.